Night in Coldwater arrives like a long exhale. Rain here does not rush in and vanish like a child's temper. It falls with a patient insistence, humming on tin roofs, whispering over the river's skin, soaking every unfinished story. If you stand on the old bridge, the one everybody simply calls Coldwater Bridge, you will hear rain telling the tale before anyone else dares. It slides along the wet railing, breathes through the seams of the planks, and gathers the secrets that towns like this try not to name. That night was one of those nights. The rain wasn't loud, but it was heavy. Each drop fell with a weight that felt remembered. Wind moved enough to make the slippery when wet sign tremble. Sodium lamps leaned and smudged their honeyed light into the mist. Beneath, the river flowed neither fast nor slow, as if listening. The first person to see the car was the paper route man. Michael Pruitt, everyone called him Mike, was 38, his back slightly bent from a life of shouldering bundles. As he veered up onto the bridge, his headlights caught something bright at a distance. He thought it a shallow pool, but when he drew close, he saw a silver Chevrolet parked skewed toward the railing. The left headlight beamed into rain, making a white column of fog. The right headlight spilled hard light across the surface below. The engine was warm. He knew because when he laid a palm to the hood, the heat pulsed through the wet like a heartbeat. The doors were not quite locked, the kind of half-turn you use when you mean to return in a minute. Inside, the front seats were damp with the ghost of wet jackets. The radio murmured, playing an old song at a sleep-friendly volume. A low male voice, steady and sad, braided itself with the rain as if the singer had never actually wanted an audience, only the night. Mike tapped the glass and called like you call to a dozing driver. No answer. He bent to peer in. The wipers inched across the windshield on their slowest setting, patient as a pulse. In the back seat lay a varsity jacket from Coldwater High, deep blue with white piping, a big stitched C. On the passenger seat, a paper bag from the downtown bakery, open, 2 glazed donuts already soft at the edges from the damp. On the floor, a coin that had rolled from the cup holder. In the console, a folded gas receipt, a gum wrapper, an unmarked cassette. He stood long enough that his heavy coat drank the rain and sagged. At last he dialed the station. The dispatcher's voice was courteous, drowsy. It sharpened when he said, "Headlights are on, and engines still warm." Sheriff Hal Morton arrived 11 minutes later. People say Hal knew the names of every dog in Coldwater, and he knew the footpaths through yards outsiders never find. He wore a dark felt hat and a rain shell. His flashlight's beam inspected the car, the rails, the river with the tenderness of a doctor considering a patient who won't speak. "Anyone inside?" he asked. "No," said Mike, "but the radio's on." They listened for a moment. Chorus. It was too soft for words, the melody even and soothing, an invitation to sleep. Hal cracked the door. The cabin smelled of damp cloth, sweetness from the bag, the plastic of an old dashboard. The keys were in the ignition. The fuel needle hovered just above a quarter tank. Hal clicked the radio off, and then his light glided across the rail. Water slicked in hair-thin threads along the wood. A car abandoned on the bridge is more than unusual in Coldwater. Everyone grows up knowing the bridge is not a place to linger. The river beneath looks calm, but in the rains it holds onto reflected silhouettes and stretches them thin. The old men say the bridge keeps footsteps. If the rain is heavy enough, it repeats them. Hal shut down both ends of the bridge. Patrol cars lit the fog amber. Tape and signs went up. Then they began. With the choreography every small force practices for years and rarely needs. Photographs. Notations. Knock and ask. It neared midnight, but rumors run faster than light in a town this size. A car with its lights on, engine warm. People thought the same thought without saying it aloud. Did someone jump? No skid marks. No clean prints. Rain had turned the deck into 1,000 gray narratives. Two rescue workers leaned over with headlamps, shouting names into the wet hush. Their breath tasted of river and storm. They called as if the river would answer if addressed politely. It didn't. Far off, the old pulp mill hummed, the steady snore of a retired animal. Night is longer in Coldwater, or maybe rain just slows the clock. They stood a long time without telling each other what they waited for. A palm slapped to the rail, a cough of cylinders catching, or the thought that lives in a town's throat and never gets voiced. Mystery naming itself. 37 minutes later, they had a name for the car. It belonged to the Parkers. Their son, Evan, 17, quarterback at Coldwater High. His friend Noah Briggs, also 17, played guitar for the church group. And Mara Dwyer, 16, apprentice baker at the downtown shop. A girl with dark hair she always tied up. A smile everyone remembered. 3 names. 3 silhouettes pulled young out of the night. 3 kids who ought to have been home, latch turned against the weather, radios set low. Evan's father arrived first, wearing a thick raincoat and tall rubber boots. He moved like a man woken from far down. His mother came after, clutching a wool shawl, staring at the car as if it were an empty crib. They were taken home gently, told there was nothing to be done by standing. They stood anyway. In a town like this, standing still is a kind of prayer. A patrolman jogged up from the north end and said someone had heard footsteps a few minutes before Mike arrived. Not sure whose. Rain muddles sound like knotty string. Slow, even footsteps headed off the middle span toward the north shore. Then nothing. "They weren't mine," Mike said. "I came from the south." Hal wrote it down. Every note was another drop in the river. His notebook bled blue at the edges. Later, someone would see the faint print of a hand on that page, a long smudge, as if someone had tried to hold on to something sliding away. Near 1 a.m., they turned the radio off, not out of necessity, but because someone realized the chorus kept looping in a peculiar way, as if the stylus had found a hairline crack in time. The silence that followed did not arrive with a snap. It came like the rain stops, gradually, as if reluctant, as if silence too had more to say. By noon, they would begin to count. They would count smudges that were almost evidence, but not quite. They would count the people who had seen or heard something and then took it back. They would count sighs of parents, headshakes of friends, and the number of times rain washed the bridge clean like a chalkboard. But that first night, with only headlights, radio, and a varsity jacket to hold on to, no one could count the one thing that mattered. The final, ordinary minutes of a life before life turns into story. Picture it. 3 kids leave the stadium under late applause of rain. They swing by the gas station, laugh about someone slipping on the tile in the hallway. They stop at the bakery. Mara asks for 2 donuts for the rainy night. Maybe someone says, "Let's head home." Maybe someone says, "Bridge is faster." Coldwater has other roads, but the bridge is always the shortcut. Shortcuts are where plots fork. Everyone in town has a bridge memory. The old remember when the deck was raw boards and spring floods took whole planks away. Kids remember summers biking across, releasing the handlebars to prove something. Lovers remember first kisses under jaundiced lamps while drizzle hid their awkwardness. Cops remember long watches in heavy weather, posted in the booth, watching fog drift like sheep. And some people remember another thing. Nights when footsteps cross without anyone to wear them. They say when rain lays thick upon the bridge, it makes a world of sound. Every drop is a letter. Every lash against the rail is punctuation. If you stand there long enough, you can hear a text being written not in words but in tempo. That night the rain wrote 3, then 2, then 1, and then none. At first light, with the rain softened, search crews arrived. They combed the water with grappling hooks, sweeping in tidy grids as if brushing a long, hidden braid. Each hall rose shedding silver. There were branches, trash, a sneaker with its story washed off, but no answer. I wasn't there then. In 1979, I was 5, in a small wood house near the edge of town, listening to rain without knowing I'd spend half a life hearing it recount this same event. I grew up with this bridge and this river, and the names no one dared speak above a murmur. In a place with this kind of silence, you learn to respect it. Respect is not surrender. Years later, when I came back, the rain fell the same. On some nights, I stood exactly where the Chevrolet had idled, laid my palm to the replaced rail, and felt the breath of the old timber under paint. Stories you think time has carried off are often only resting, waiting on a listener. I thought I was ready to listen. When you are, the rain begins. The first person I sought was Mike. He sat in the all-night diner, hair silver like river foam, eyes with the alertness of a man used to waking before dawn. He still carried papers, though few waited for them anymore. He spoke in a voice steeped in tea. "There's something I never told the sheriff." I waited. "The song on the radio," he said. I heard it a lot in the years after. But that night, in the chorus, something threaded in. Not static, more like someone walking across a room. A wooden room. Wet. I felt a shiver. Footsteps. The phrase drifts through Coldwater like a polite greeting. Everyone knows it. Few say it. "Could it have been your imagination?" I asked, as kindly as you can ask a question people here have been asked too often. He nodded toward the window glass where rain pressed the world into a fogged pane. "Listen to the rain. Around here, imagination has ears." At the Parkers' Evans room had been kept like a photograph. His mother, Lorraine, no longer tended flowers on the porch, but she changed the water in the little vase near his window. She opened the door slowly, like the hinges had learned to hold their breath. "I thought you'd come earlier," she said, as if the story had chosen me and she'd only been waiting for me to catch up. On the wall, a team poster rimmed with signatures. Under the bed, a shoebox of notes, ticket stubs, winter-dried dandelions pressed in a dictionary. On the desk, an unmarked cassette, twin to the one from the car. "Evans," she said. "He liked to record the weather. He'd put the recorder by the window when it rained and say he wanted to remember it later." She smiled, the way a penciled line smiles, a hint more than a shape. "Maybe the sky remembered him first." I borrowed the tape. In my rented room, I found an old player, swabbed the heads, and turned the volume low. The spool's soft chew sounded like a clock with its own gait. Then rain, the firm, even clatter of a metal awning. At 73 minutes, something joined. 4 steps, then a pause, then 4 steps again. No door, no voice, only rain and those measured 4s, like someone practicing how to walk a bridge that has forgotten them. I put the player down and pulled the plug. Silence is a shell here. If you hold it to your ear, the town comes through. Sounds are not only sounds, they are tracks and residues, the way the world leaves its prints on wood and water. This story would not speak through the usual kind of evidence. It would speak by rain and hush, and the moldy things memory tries to discard. The next day I went to the bridge. The rain was a gentle hand smoothing a wrinkled cloth. I stood in the middle where the Chevrolet had idled. I counted my own steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, and stopped. It felt as though something stopped with me. I told myself it was the big drops falling from the edge of the lighting truss. I set my hand to the rail. Wood, if you wait it out, will tell you. Where the planer bit rough and where it ran true. Where the nails bite and where they loosen. Where people set their secrets down and hoped the grain would keep them. I closed my eyes and lowered my voice the way people recite prayers for the absent. Evan, I said. Noah. Mara. Their names landed like drops, joined an infinite count, vanished. I wasn't expecting an answer. The quiet deepened anyway, soft and thick, blanket-like. That blanket had a scent. Wet timber, river, then something else, as faint as breath on your neck. Mint. The old bridge tender, Orson, still lived in a little house near the north end. He no longer kept the post, but he stayed, as if the bridge were the town's throat and he its patient guardian. I told him my pieces. He nodded slowly. Mint, he said. Haven't heard anyone say that for a long time. He told me that back then, at Friday night games, a thin fellow in a rain slicker used to sell peppermint to the kids, hat down low over his ears, sold the candy, then stood at the edge of the bleachers and watched the rain. Nobody knew him. Folks assumed he was somebody's uncle. One night he didn't show. Remember his face? I asked. Orson shook his head. Rain has the better memory, he muttered, then said he had something I should see. It was a browned sheet tucked in a swollen notebook. A pencil sketch of the bridge in rain, 3 small figures at the rail. In the corner, faint words, "Don't look at the water, listen to the wood." Some sentences sink into you because they confirm what lives in your bones. I thought of that first night, footsteps on a cassette, my 1, 2, 3, 4. I thought of the mint, cool breath, someone standing almost close enough to lean and whisper. When I left Orson's, I walked the riverbank. The grass soaked my socks and cooled my ankles. Waterbirds weighed the pilings like dark commas. Where the reeds grew thickest, fog swirled like a separate weather. In the swirl, a sliver flashed, a hair clip, silver filmed with mud, the kind a 16-year-old might use to capture stray strands when wind insists. I wrapped it in my handkerchief. I wasn't sure if I shook from chill or memory of a face I had never truly seen, but had known by name since I could spell. That night I came back again. There are places on the bridge that feel like its pulse. If you stand in one, the rain resonates slightly lower, deeper. In one of those spots I heard knocking, 3 soft taps, then stillness, then 3 again. Not metal, not water. Like someone rapping a teacher's desk with their knuckles, counting the beats of a learned lesson. I looked around. No one. Only night, but night counts as someone in cold water. Back at the room, I threaded the cassette to the 4s, set the hair clip beside the player like a modest witness, and closed my eyes. I pictured Evan's hand on the rail. Noah looking back at the twin cones of light painted in mist. Mara pinning a rebel strand and laughing at a harmless tease. Rain, 4 steps. Stop. 4 steps. Stop. The peppermint man at the bleachers in somebody's memory. The silver Chevrolet quietly warming the damp. An old song trying to hold time still by repeating its refrain. And then something calling them, not by shouting, but by tapping a steady, polite rhythm. A kind invitation. Tomorrow I will take the way people rarely take, down under the abutment, where earth stays sponged and mosses grip the crumbling mortar like small, green fingers. I will not look much at the water. I will put my hand to the wood. I will listen. Tonight, you and I will let the rain speak a little longer, because to find 3 kids who left a bridge many years ago, you have to move as lightly as they must have, stop where they stopped, and listen as the timber listened, patiently, a long while, like a song that never truly ends, only softens, until you drift to sleep, and the bridge keeps its watch over a secret not ready to come ashore. Morning in Coldwater does not arrive suddenly. It seeps in the way rain seeps through a ceiling, slow and inevitable, until you realize the room is no longer dark. That morning was the color of faded paper, soft gray, as if the day had already been written long before anyone woke. The bridge was still cordoned off, patrol cars waiting with their lights dimmed, and even before the first coffee shop opened, people were gathering along the sidewalks. They did not speak in full sentences. They whispered fragments, small pieces of a story that was already spreading faster than the rain itself. A car left running, a varsity jacket in the back seat, 3 kids who never came home. In the Parker kitchen, Lorraine sat at the table with both hands cupped around a mug that had long since gone cold. Without realizing, she had placed a plate at Evan's usual spot, scrambled eggs cooling, toast untouched. Across from her, Mr. Parker stared at the pendulum clock on the wall as though its steady swing might explain something. He said it was supposed to take 20 minutes, from the football field to home. 20 minutes. His voice cracked on the number, as if time itself had betrayed them. Lorraine whispered softer things, the details that mothers keep. The green shirt she had ironed, not the team one, the other one, the one he wanted to wear because he said it made him look nice. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth when the words tangled, and the only sound left was the rain sliding down their kitchen window. At the sheriff's office, Hal Morton filled in the report, his paper already sagging with damp from the night before. He wrote with the precision of habit, the times, the discoveries, the details that made up a story that refused to stay still. At 10:43 p.m., the Chevrolet found by Mike Pruitt. At 10:50, the engine warm, the radio on, the lights still shining. At 11:02, the vehicle identified as belonging to the Parker family. At 11:25, no prints, no skid marks. At 11:30, reports of footsteps, direction northbound. He underlined that last line twice. His pen pressed hard enough that the ink bled, veins spreading on the page. He leaned back and closed his eyes just for a moment. In the hush of his office, he thought he heard that song again, faint, the one playing on the car radio. He shook it off, told himself it was the rain on the awning. But old men know the difference between water and memory. At the all-night diner, June brewed another pot of coffee that nobody finished. She had worked the night shift for decades, and she remembered those kids. Evan had brought Mara there once after practice, both of them still in their muddy cleats. They split a slice of pie, laughing about who would pay. Noah had sat in the corner booth with his guitar, strumming soft enough to be polite, loud enough to be heard. June told the story to anyone who would listen, and then again, and again. Each time her words grew smaller, as though she believed if she repeated them enough, the sharp edges might wear smooth. She always ended the same way. They were good kids, just good kids. The words hovered above the counter like steam over a cooling cup. In her own bedroom, Clara Hewitt sat awake, eyes raw. She had been Mara's closest friend. At 10:31 p.m., the last call of the night had come to her phone. Mara had laughed, the sound quick and bright, but then the rain rushed in over the line. After that came something else. Clara had told the police it was just static, but when she replayed it in her mind, it was breathing, close to the receiver, as if someone else had leaned in. Mara had said, "We're almost," and then nothing more, just the water. Just that faint, unwelcome breath. Clara pressed her phone to her ear even now, long after the call was gone, hoping echoes might still cling to the wire. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them on the bridge. Not 3 sets of footsteps. 4. The town carried the weight in its own quiet ways. At the grocery, shoppers avoided the bakery aisle where Mara had worked. At the high school, Evans and Noah's lockers gaped open like mouths that had forgotten how to close. The church bell tolled, though no service was scheduled. People walked slower, spoke less, as if 3 absences had thinned the very air. By evening, candles appeared on the bridge. Small flames quivered inside glass jars set against the wet rail. The rain softened but did not stop. It rarely stopped. The air smelled of wax and river and faintly something colder. Peppermint. Some swore they smelled it on the bridge, others inside the diner, carried in on a stranger's coat. It was a scent that didn't belong, sharp and sweet, lingering in the damp. By nightfall, the story had already hardened into legend. The car, the jacket, the donuts, the song on repeat. But each retelling bent a detail. Some swore the engine was still running, others said it was off. Some said the wipers moved steadily, others that they were still. Truth swayed like the bridge itself, heavy under rain. But there was one detail no one argued: the footsteps. Too many had heard them to dismiss. Slow, deliberate, not hurried like kids rushing home, steady like someone being led. In Coldwater, silence grows where words should be. That night, as the town shut its doors and listened to the rain settle on the streets, the silence on the bridge grew thicker, deeper, alive. It was not only the silence of 3 missing kids, it was the silence of the ones left behind, afraid to ask the question that pulsed in every kitchen, every booth, every pew. If the bridge could keep their footsteps, what else might it keep? The bridge at Coldwater has always been more than a span of wood and iron. In towns like ours, bridges become stages. They are where people pause, where secrets change hands, where lovers kiss, where drifters rest, where the wind carries words you are not supposed to hear. Every board remembers. Every nail has been touched by stories. The trouble is, some of those stories never left. It was built in 1923, back when men still hauled timber by horse team and drove bolts with mallets the size of sledgehammers. They say the river was lower then, the banks steeper, and workers hammered pilings deep into mud that smelled of sulfur and moss. Some of the crew swore they heard knocking from underneath, like the earth itself resisted. One man drowned on a morning when the mist was so thick no one saw him fall. His body was never recovered, and his name is still carved into the wooden plaque that hangs in the courthouse. The older generation whispers that the bridge opened with a debt already owed. Over the decades, the bridge collected accidents. In '38, a Model T slid off during an ice storm carrying a family of 4. The car was recovered. The family never was. In '52, a fisherman swore he saw a woman standing on the railing in a red dress, though no one could agree who she was. In '61, 2 soldiers on leave crashed their motorcycle near the middle span. The bike was crushed, but the men simply vanished, leaving their uniforms folded on the seat, as if they had stepped out of them. Each time something happened, the town added a new nail, a new plank, a new coat of paint. But the rain wore it back down, as though the bridge refused to be fixed. People started to say it had its own pulse, that when you walk across on a wet night, the wood doesn't just creak, it breathes. There's an old story told by teachers in hushed tones. Children would dare each other to run across at midnight. If you were unlucky, they said, the bridge would copy your steps, echoing them after you stopped. And if you turned around to look, you would see only mist, and hear those steps continue until they reached you. When I was young, I thought it was just folklore, something to keep us home after dark. But the older I grew, the more I learned that in Coldwater, folklore has a way of keeping score. The sheriff once told me about the sound the bridge makes in heavy rain. He called it the long sigh. As the wood swells, the bolts shift, and the whole structure seems to exhale, like an old man rolling over in bed. But the sigh is never the same length twice. Some nights it lasts a few seconds. Other nights it goes on until you're sure it isn't wood at all, but something alive, waiting below the planks. People say the bridge remembers every tragedy, that it keeps the weight of those who crossed and never came back. Some nights, when the fog is low, You can hear a chorus of faint shuffles, as if dozens of unseen shoes are hurrying across in the dark. It isn't the kind of story you print in the local paper, but ask anyone who's lived here long enough, and they'll have their version. They'll tell you about the night they heard boots when no one was there, or the time they smelled peppermint on a windless evening, or the way the river shines too brightly under the full moon, as though reflecting more faces than stand above it. By the time Evan, Noah, and Mara disappeared, the bridge already carried half a century of whispered warnings. Parents had always said, "Don't linger there. Take the long road if you can." But kids are kids, and a shortcut is a shortcut. They walked into the same story that had been waiting since 1923. The story that swells with rain, the story that sighs when no one is listening, and the story that, if you are quiet enough, will walk your footsteps back to you. On that Friday night in November, the town had gathered at the high school field. The bleachers were slick with drizzle, the air sharp with the smell of wet popcorn and fried dough. Football had always been Coldwater's proud distraction, the way a small town keeps its chest lifted against the weight of the world. Evan Parker wore his green shirt under the pads, a private superstition. Noah Briggs carried his guitar pick in his pocket, rubbing it for luck. Mara Dwyer was not on the field, but in the stands, her laughter bright enough to cut through the rain for anyone close enough to hear. The game ended the way small-town games often end. A little victory that meant the world for one night, and then slipped into memory. The scoreboard blinked, umbrellas bobbed like dark flowers, and people hurried toward their cars. In that river of bodies, 3 young lives drifted together. Evan slung his jacket over one shoulder. Noah tapped the rhythm of a song on the bleacher rail. Mara tucked her hair into a clip that would later be found in the mud. At the gas station, they stopped just long enough to fill the tank. The clerk remembered them, or thought he did. 3 figures under the canopy, coins clinking into the till, the smell of gasoline sharp in the damp air. He said Evan joked about the price. Noah drummed his fingers on the counter. Mara smiled the way she always did. But when asked to swear to it, his certainty faltered. Rain has a way of erasing detail, leaving only outlines. From there, they drove to the bakery. The owner recalled Mara stepping inside, shaking water from her hair, asking for 2 donuts in a paper bag. "For the rainy night," she'd said, her voice warm against the hum of the refrigerators. She left coins on the counter, coins that would later be found damp in the bottom of the bag, forgotten on the passenger seat. The timeline was simple, on paper. Field to gas station to bakery, bakery toward home. It should have taken 20 minutes. Instead, it took them onto the bridge, where time folded in on itself. No one knew why they chose that road. Perhaps it was faster. Perhaps it was habit. Or perhaps it was something else. The pull of the shortcut. The invisible hand that leads people toward the place where stories are waiting. What we do know is this. By 10:31 p.m., Mara's voice was on the phone with her friend, Clara. She laughed, and then the rain drowned the sound. The call cut short. By 10:43 p.m., the Chevrolet sat idling on the bridge, headlights cutting white spears into the mist. Somewhere between those 12 minutes, 3 young lives stepped out of the ordinary and into the silence that still haunts this town. Imagine it. The tires hissing on wet planks, the steady thump of wipers, the warmth of the car against the chill of the night. Imagine them joking or arguing or falling into that quiet only friends share when the road itself speaks louder. Imagine the moment the car slowed, pulled to the side, stopped near the railing. Did one of them ask to stop? Did something on the bridge catch their eyes? Or did the bridge itself, patient as always, call them down into its history? We can trace their steps on paper, but the paper cannot tell us what mattered most, not what was said, not who opened the door first, not why they left the engine running. The record shows only a car, a jacket, a bag of donuts, a song on the radio. The rest is absence, and the absence is louder than any evidence. 12 minutes. That is all it took for 3 voices to vanish into rain. 12 minutes, and the town would never breathe the same again. And yet, if you stand on the bridge even now and close your eyes, you can almost follow them. From the field's muddy grass to the glow of the gas station, to the smell of warm bread, and finally to the boards that breathe under rain. Footsteps you cannot see, only hear. Steps that end where silence begins. Mike Pruitt had walked the same route for 20 years, long before most folks in town owned alarm clocks they could trust. He said he liked being the first soul awake, liked hearing the world before it remembered itself. The sound of his boots on wet pavement was a kind of hymn, steady, known only to him and the dogs that barked from porches as he passed. That night, the rain was heavier than usual. It beaded on his cap, slid down the collar of his jacket, and turned the folded papers under his arm into sponges if he didn't hurry. But Mike never hurried. He had learned the pace of the town, and he kept it even when the weather didn't. As he turned toward Coldwater Bridge, his headlights touched the mist, and that was when he saw it. A pale gleam, something shining where nothing should be. At first he thought it was a sheet of water, one of those puddles that collects in the dip of the planks. But the shine didn't ripple, it glared. He eased the truck closer and felt the unease before he saw the shape of the Chevrolet. It sat skewed, one headlight glaring into rain, the other thrown wide across the river like a searchlight sweeping for someone already gone. Steam curled faintly from under the hood. Mike knew warmth when he felt it, and when he laid a hand to the metal, the heat was unmistakable, thrumming beneath his palm like a trapped animal. He leaned in through the glass. The smell of wet wool, the sweetness of pastry, the faint plastic tang of an old dashboard, all of it came through even with the window rolled up. He saw the varsity jacket, the paper bag, the gum wrapper, the cassette without a label, and he felt it, stronger than any sight or smell, the sense that someone had only just stepped away. He tapped the window and called out, careful not to startle whoever might be dozing inside. The rain swallowed his voice, no movement. He tried the handle, not locked, not open either, that half-turn that says I'll be right back, the kind of door you close when you believe the night is still yours. Mike remembered the song on the radio. He would never forget it. Not the words, he could never recall them clearly, but the way the melody seemed to lean out of the speakers, low and tired, as if it too had been waiting. Later, he would swear that under the chorus he heard another sound, faint, almost hidden. Footsteps, wooden, measured, as though someone was pacing in a room that wasn't there. He drew back, water dripping from the brim of his cap, and for the first time in all his years walking this town in silence, he felt watched, not by a person, not by an animal, but by the bridge itself. The boards shifted under the weight of rain, and the sound came up through his boots like a pulse. He reached for the radio on his belt and called the sheriff. His voice was steady, but afterward, he said he couldn't recall the exact words he used. Just that he told them the truth. Headlights on, engine warm, no driver in sight. When he stepped back to wait, he kept his eyes on the Chevrolet. He expected at any moment the driver's door would open. A kid would stumble out, embarrassed, laughing off the whole thing. He imagined the explanation. A flat tire, a late-night dare, maybe just a stolen minute to watch the river in the rain. But the door never opened. The bridge stayed still. The car hummed softly to itself, and the rain fell as though it had been falling forever. Years later, when asked about that night, Mike always told the same detail first. Not the lights, not the heat of the hood, not even the song. He said it was the pause. That half-second between the end of one verse and the beginning of the next. In that pause, He swore. He heard breathing. Not his. Not the rain's. Something close. Something that did not belong to the empty car. He would end his story the same way every time, leaning forward, lowering his voice as though the bridge itself might overhear. "I knew right then," he'd say. "The kids weren't the only ones out there that night. There was someone else on that bridge, or something that walked like someone." And then he would sit back, eyes drifting to the window, to whatever rain happened to be falling that day. Because once you've stood on Coldwater Bridge in the silence after a song, you don't hear rain the same way again. Morning spread itself thin over Coldwater, gray light pressing down on the bridge like another weight. The rain had softened but not ended, dripping steadily from the rails, turning the planks into slick mirrors. Sheriff Morton stood with his collar turned high as the first search crews arrived, boots heavy, ropes coiled, grappling hooks clanging against metal. They moved with the solemn rhythm of men who had done this before, but who never wanted to do it again. The river below waited in silence. Coldwater River had always looked calm on the surface, but anyone who knew it understood its trick. The current ran deep, tugging quietly at anything foolish enough to linger. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was patient. A thief that never hurried. The men spread out across the bridge. Hooks swung, dropped, and cut into the water with hollow splashes. Lines tightened. The sound of winches turning mingled with the rain, like a strange mechanical prayer. They dragged the hooks back and forth, brushing the hidden floor of the river, combing it like fingers through tangled hair. The first thing they brought up was a branch, stripped pale and clean. Then came a tangle of weeds, black and slick as ropes of hair, a plastic bottle, a tire that must have been down there for years. Each time the hooks surfaced, the crew shook their heads, water spilling from the iron teeth like silver tears. After an hour, one hook caught something softer. The rope strained, the winch groaned, and what rose from the water looked at first like fabric. It was dark cloth, waterlogged and heavy, tearing as it hit the air. The men pulled it onto the deck. It was a piece of jacket, so ruined by mud and current that the color was hard to name. Blue, maybe, or black. The sheriff bent close, touched it with his gloved hand, and frowned. It was too decayed, too shredded. It had been in the water much longer than one night. By noon, the river had surrendered only fragments. A shoe, size too small for any of the missing kids. A child's toy car, paint eaten away. A rusted padlock that no one remembered losing. Nothing that could be claimed, nothing that could be tied to Evan, Noah, or Mara. Just the river's old collection, reluctantly shared. And still, the crew swore they felt resistance. The hooks would snag on something solid, something that gave just enough to promise, then slipped away before the surface could show it. Once, a diver swore he saw a shadow down there, broad as a person, drifting at the edge of his light. But when he turned, it was gone, only silt curling like smoke. By late afternoon, the search slowed. The sheriff called for a pause, though he did not want to. His men were tired, soaked through, faces gray with the chill of the water. The river, meanwhile, seemed unchanged, flowing steady, unbothered by the fuss above. Those who were there swore that as they packed up, the air thickened with a smell that didn't belong to rain or river. It was faint, sharp, almost sweet. "Peppermint," someone muttered. "Peppermint," again. The men exchanged glances but said nothing. They coiled their ropes, stacked their hooks, and left the bridge as if leaving a church where the sermon had gone unfinished. That night, the town went to bed knowing the river had been asked for answers and had given none. Only scraps, only echoes, only the suggestion that something more lay hidden. And as the rain began again, steady and calm, the people of Coldwater realized a terrible truth. The bridge might keep its silence forever, but so might the river beneath it. Orson had lived beside Coldwater Bridge for most of his life. His small house leaned toward the river, its windows always fogged, its roof always dripping. He wasn't on the county payroll anymore, not officially, but people still called him the bridge tender. He was the one who sat awake when others slept, listening to the weather, listening to the boards shift. When I found him, years after that night, he was already old. His back bent like the shape of the railing, his eyes pale as the river in moonlight. He greeted me slowly, as though every word had to climb a staircase before reaching his lips. He told me he remembered the night clearly, not the time, not the faces, but the sound. It had been raining steady, hard enough to turn the bridge into an instrument. The wood swelled, the bolts strained, and the air filled with a hollow music. But underneath it, Orson said, there were footsteps. They weren't running, he told me. Not kids messing about. They were slow. Careful. One after another. The kind of steps you hear when someone doesn't want to be heard. He sat forward when he said it, his hands shaking slightly. He lifted one finger, tapping it against the arm of his chair. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then he paused, and did it again. 4 steps. Pause. 4 more. I counted them, he said. I always counted. They stopped near the middle, right where the car was later found. And then, nothing. Just the rain. I asked him if he looked out the window, if he saw anyone on the bridge. He shook his head slowly. Mist was thick. Lanterns didn't help. I saw shadows. Maybe. 3, maybe 4. I can't swear. His voice lowered then, almost a whisper. But I'll tell you this. When the rain eased for a breath, I heard something else. Not steps. Not the river. Breathing. Like somebody standing just outside my window, waiting for me to notice. I didn't open the door. I didn't look. I sat there and let the rain come back, because sometimes the rain is kinder than what it hides. He leaned back after that, tired, eyes closing as if the memory had cost him. On the table beside his chair was a notebook, warped with damp. The pages inside were filled with lines, dates, numbers. It was his record of the bridge, when the boards sighed, when the bolts creaked, when footsteps walked by unseen. Flipping through, I saw the entry for that night. The handwriting was thin and crooked, ink blurred, but the words were clear enough. Footsteps on the bridge. 4 beats. Pause. Repeated. Stopped at center. Silence afterward. When I looked up, Orson was staring at the river through the window. The rain had begun again, faint, brushing the glass. The bridge remembers, he murmured. Always has. But remembering isn't the same as telling. And with that, he closed his eyes as if the conversation was over. Outside, the bridge groaned softly in the damp, stretching like an old body settling back to sleep. A week after the car was found, Sheriff Hal Morton unlocked his office early, as he always did. The rain had been light that morning, enough to dampen the steps, but not enough to keep him from walking. He found the envelope on his desk, plain white, no postage stamp, no return address. Someone had slipped it under the door in the night. He opened it carefully, expecting another tip from a concerned neighbor. Coldwater was full of people who thought they had seen something or wanted to, but the paper inside was different. It was heavy, old, the kind that absorbed ink like skin absorbs blood. And the ink itself was wrong. Not black, not blue, green. The message was short. written in a hand that pressed hard enough to bite through the page. "Don't look at the water. Listen to the ground." Morton read it twice. Then again. The words crawled over him in a way normal tips never did. He had spent his whole life staring at rivers, searching for what they might give back. But the letter insisted otherwise. The water was not where the answer waited. It was underfoot, beneath the bridge, in the soil, in the dark places no one wanted to touch. He locked the letter in his desk drawer, but its weight lingered. That afternoon, he walked the bridge alone. The rain had returned, steady, soaking his hat, dripping into his collar. He bent down and pressed his palm against the boards. They were swollen, slick, breathing with the rhythm of the weather. He closed his eyes. The sound came slowly. At first, only the rain. Then, faint, deep, almost buried. A knock. Not metal, not wood, but something below both, muffled, like knuckles rapping on a coffin lid. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 again. He pulled his hand back as though burned. Later, when asked if he heard anything unusual, Sheriff Morton would always say no. But he began to carry the letter with him, folded tight in his wallet. The words stayed, a whisper against his chest. "Don't look at the water. Listen to the ground." And in the nights that followed, people said they saw the sheriff standing at the edge of the bridge in the rain, his eyes closed, his hand pressed flat to the boards, as though trying to hear a language older than his own. The newspaper office in Coldwater was a tired building, brick faded to the color of old ash, windows streaked with years of storms. The presses had gone quiet long ago, replaced by regional editions printed hours away. But the building still stood. One afternoon, while the rain whispered against the roof, I asked the editor if I might climb the stairs to the attic. He shrugged, said there was nothing up there but dust and wasps' nests, but handed me a key anyway. The door at the top of the stair stuck before it opened, and when it did, the air that escaped was stale and damp, the kind of air that has been waiting too long. Inside were boxes sagging with age, stacks of yellowed paper, photographs curling at the edges. A single bulb dangled overhead, weak, throwing long shadows that made the room seem bigger than it was. I sifted through stacks of forgotten editions, headlines of storms, of school fairs, of the small victories that once mattered here. And then, in the bottom of a crate marked 1979, I found it. A leather-bound notebook, warped, its cover water-stained. On the first page, written in hurried script, was a name. David Keene, intern reporter. The entries began weeks before the disappearance. Notes about the football team, about Mara's family bakery, about Evan and Noah, their faces already familiar even before the bridge claimed them. But when the dates reached November, the handwriting grew more frantic, lines slanting, ink smudged as if written in rain. November 9th, rumors of a man at the field again, selling mints. No one seems to know his name. November 12th, children say the bridge sighs when it rains. Tried it myself, felt it. November 14th, heard a girl laugh on the bridge when no one was there. Too clear to be imagination. November 17th, the night of the game. Saw 3 kids walk toward the lot. Thought I saw a 4th behind them. Tall, hat pulled low. I wrote it down in case I forget. The last page was the strangest. The ink had run in streaks, words bleeding into one another, but I could still read them. Don't follow the lights. They lead down. They always lead down. The notebook ended there. No signature, no explanation. David Keene never became a reporter. When I asked about him later, the editor said he left town soon after, gave no reason, never came back. Some said he went north. Some said he disappeared like the rest. I closed the journal and sat there in the dim attic, the rain ticking softly on the roof above. It felt as though the pages themselves were still breathing, holding their story close, unwilling to let go. And for the first time, I wondered if the bridge had claimed more than just Evan, Noah, and Mara that night. Maybe it had taken anyone who dared write too close to its silence. The bridge at night is never fully dark. Even when the lamps along its span flicker out, even when the town itself pulls its curtains tight, the river holds a pale glow. Mist rises from it, faint, like breath on glass, and it paints the boards with a shifting silver that never quite stays still. It was in that light that I returned, the journal of David Keene still heavy in my pocket. The rain had quieted to a drizzle, soft enough that I could hear my own footsteps as I walked toward the center. Each step echoed back, a little late, as though the bridge wanted to remember me in its own time. I stopped midway, where the Chevrolet had been found. The railing was slick under my hand, swollen wood that seemed to thrum faintly. I listened. At first, only the usual sounds, rain pattering, the distant rush of the river, the creak of bolts. Then came something else. Footsteps. Not mine. They were faint, deliberate, measured. 4 beats, then a pause, 4 again. The rhythm matched Orson's tapping finger, the notes he had drummed on the arm of his chair. I turned my head, slowly, toward the far end of the bridge. Through the veil of drizzle, I saw a shape moving. Tall, narrow, a figure pacing along the boards. The mist bent around it as if unwilling to touch. It walked the same pattern. 4 steps, pause, 4 steps again. I called out. My voice was swallowed whole. The figure did not answer, did not even falter. It moved with the steady patience of something that had no need to rush, no need to acknowledge, just 4 steps. A pause. 4 more. I stepped forward, and for a moment, the rhythm broke. The figure stopped. The mist thickened, and when it thinned again, the boards were empty. I was alone, or so the bridge wanted me to believe. Still, the sound lingered. Even with nothing before my eyes, the footsteps continued faintly under my feet, as though they had sunk into the planks themselves. I backed away slowly, hand tight on the railing, heart keeping the same time as the steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, stop. Again. By the time I reached the end of the span, the rain had risen into a steady sheet, heavy enough to wash sound away. I looked back once. The bridge lay empty, shining wet in the lamplight. But I knew what I had seen, or what the bridge had chosen to show me. Later that night, lying awake in my rented room, I pulled out the journal and read the last page again. The words bled across the paper, blurred but still sharp enough to wound. Don't follow the lights. They lead down. They always lead down. And I understood. Whatever I had seen on the bridge wasn't walking to cross it. It was walking to lead someone off it. The bar sat low against the water, a squat building of brick and wood where neon lights buzzed faintly, even when no one was inside. It had always been a place where fishermen ended their nights, and mill workers dulled the sound of machines with whiskey. In 1979, it was where kids like Evan and Noah weren't supposed to go, and where someone like Mara might have followed them out of curiosity, or maybe just for warmth from the rain. I found the place still open, though barely. The sign out front leaned like it had grown tired of its own glow. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood, beer soaked into floorboards, and the faint ghost of smoke from decades past. The stools at the bar stood in a row, but 3 of them at the far end had worn deeper grooves, as if someone had sat there night after night, never moving. The owner was a heavy man named Carl, face lined like old wood. He poured me a coffee instead of a drink, as if he understood I wasn't there for liquor. When I asked about the kids, his eyes shifted to those 3 stools at the end of the bar. "I remember them," he said, voice rough. "Not that night, maybe, but other nights. Football kids. And the girl, she had a laugh you couldn't mistake, like glass breaking, but in a good way. They sat back there once, didn't order much, just Coke, a plate of fries. Nothing that should have stuck with me. But I remember it because of the music." I asked him what music, and he looked away toward the dark corner near the jukebox. "There was a man here that night," he said. "Not one of the regulars. Slim, tall, hat pulled low, didn't drink, didn't talk. Just sat with a harmonica cupped in his hands, played it soft like he was breathing through the metal instead of playing a tune. Rain outside, harmonica inside, it was the same rhythm, you understand, like the weather had followed us in." Carl said the kids had stopped talking when the sound began. Mara tilted her head as if listening for words in it. Noah drummed his fingers, trying to follow along. Evan frowned, restless. Then after a while, the man in the hat stood, tucked the harmonica into his coat, and left without a word. "They went quiet after that," Carl said. "All 3 of them. Ate in silence. Then they left too. I never saw them come back." He rubbed a glass with a rag that was already wet, then shook his head. "You'll say I'm misremembering. Maybe I am. But I hear that sound sometimes, late at night when it rains. A harmonica, low, steady, no tune at all. Just breath made metal. Like someone calling out in a language you can't answer." I looked at the 3 stools again. The grooves in the wood seemed deeper, darker, as if they had been waiting for me to notice. Rain slid down the windows, streaking the neon into broken red and blue. And in the hum of the lights, for just a moment, I thought I heard it too. A single note, trembling, holding its breath. In a town as small as Coldwater, silence can spread faster than words. After the night of the bridge, after the searches and the candles and the questions with no answers, people stopped saying their names. Evan, Noah, Mara. The syllables grew heavier than the rain, and soon it was easier to leave them unspoken. At the grocery, the cashier would pause if someone mentioned the bakery, then change the subject quickly. At the school, teachers marked attendance without speaking the missing names, sliding their eyes down the page instead. At church, the pastor offered prayers for those lost, but never said who. The words were treated like broken glass, too sharp to touch, too dangerous to drop. It wasn't just the names. It was the night itself. People began to call it that night, never the night of the game, never the night on the bridge. Just that night, and everyone knew what was meant. Superstitions grew. Some families told their children not to whistle after dark, afraid the sound might invite footsteps on the bridge. Others placed salt by their doors on rainy evenings. At the diner, June started turning off the radio after 11, as if music itself had become dangerous. I noticed something stranger still. Whenever people did slip and say one of the names, they lowered their voices almost to a whisper, as if speaking it too loudly might call something back, or worse, as if it might remind the bridge of what it had already taken. There were places in town that became hushed ground. The bakery closed its doors for months, though its windows still smelled faintly of sugar and yeast when the wind blew right. The lockers at the high school remained untouched, dust collecting where friends once gathered. The Parker family's porch light burned every night. Not bright, just steady, a beacon for someone who never returned. And through it all, the bridge kept standing. People crossed it quickly, eyes down, as though afraid to draw its attention. No one lingered. No one leaned against the rail. No one looked too long at the water. I began to understand. Coldwater wasn't just grieving. It was hiding from its own story, from the possibility that the story wasn't finished. And in that silence, heavier than the rain, the legend began to take root. The kind of legend that doesn't need to be told out loud because it's already in the air, in the way people avoid the bakery, in the way children stop their songs at sundown, in the way the bridge sighs when it rains and no one dares to answer. The words we don't say are sometimes louder than the ones we do. And in Coldwater, the silence had become its own kind of curse. The shed stood behind the old lumber yard, half collapsed under years of storms. Ivy climbed its walls, moss clung to its roof, and the padlock on its door had long since rusted into a stain. I wasn't looking for anything when I found it, just shelter from the rain. But the door gave under my hand, and the smell of damp earth and rotting timber drifted out like a sigh. Inside, the shed was filled with broken crates, bent nails, and tools gone blunt. Dust hung thick in the air, though the corners gleamed wet where rain had slipped through the roof. And in the farthest corner, under a stack of warped boards, I saw it. A wooden box, small enough to carry, covered in green moss like skin. The lid stuck, but when I pried it loose, the smell that rose was sharp, metallic, like wet film. Inside lay a stack of Polaroids, their edges curled, their colors bled by water. I lifted the first, careful, and the image revealed itself through the blur. It was the bridge, taken at night, rain streaking across the frame in white scars, headlights glowing faintly at the far end, as if a car had just pulled onto the span. The second Polaroid showed the middle of the bridge. Mist rose thick, swallowing the lamps, but 3 figures stood faintly near the rail, or maybe 4. The film was smeared, the outlines uncertain, but my eyes kept finding a taller shadow among them. The third photograph was worse. It was the railing alone, rain running down wood. And something on the boards, a shape dark and narrow, like a hand pressed flat, fingers spread, but no body attached. I set the Polaroid down, my hands trembling. The others in the stack were no clearer. Blurry images of the bridge, the river, the mist. But the last one caught my breath. It was a close shot of the guest book from the Ashridge hostel, the same one I had heard about in whispers. The page torn at the corner, water-smudged, but still legible. 3 words scrawled across it, slanting and urgent. Don't follow me. I sat in that shed for a long time, rain ticking on the roof, photographs spread around me like a deck of cards no one should play. Who had taken them? Who had hidden them here? And why leave them to rot in silence, unless the bridge itself had demanded they be forgotten? When I left, I carried the Polaroids with me, sealed in a plastic bag, though part of me wondered if they should have stayed buried. Some things rot for a reason. Some things are meant to be consumed by rain. But that night, lying awake in the dim room above the diner, I placed them on the table beside me. And though I kept my eyes closed, I felt them glowing faintly in the dark, as if the bridge itself had followed me home. The Coldwater radio station was little more than a squat brick building near the edge of town, its antenna leaning like an old man with a cane. The place had been quiet for years, replaced by syndicated signals that drifted in from bigger cities. But in a storage room upstairs, cardboard boxes still held reels of tape, labeled in faded marker. I had gone there looking for music, background noise from the year of the disappearance. What I found instead was silence. The reel was dated November 17, 1979, the night of the game, the night of the bridge. The handwriting on the label was hurried, smudged. I set the reel on the machine, threaded the tape, and let it spin. At first it was ordinary. A disc jockey with a tired voice, spinning love songs between the weather reports. Static wavered in and out, the way small-town radio always did on stormy nights. At 10:20 p.m. he introduced a song. The same song, I realized, that had been playing in the Chevrolet when Mike Pruitt found it. A low, steady tune, the kind that sounds more like breathing than music. The song played. The chorus came. Then abruptly, the reel cut to silence. No static, no music, just a void. The counter on the machine kept turning. I watched the numbers climb. 1 minute, 2, 3. The tape still moved, but nothing came out. When sound returned, it was as if nothing had happened. The DJ's voice slid back into the air, cheerful, unaware, announcing the next track. No apology, no mention of technical trouble, just the broadcast continuing, as though 7 minutes had never existed. I stopped the reel and rewound it, played it again. The same thing, the same gap. Exactly 7 minutes long. I sat there in that empty station, rain brushing the windows, and felt the kind of chill that doesn't come from weather. Someone had erased that time. Not by accident, not by machine failure. The reel turned smooth, the tape unbroken. The silence was deliberate. 7 minutes. The same window between Mara's call to her friend and the discovery of the car. The same breath of time when 3 teenagers stepped off the map. Later, when I asked around, no one at the station remembered a broadcast problem that night. No one recalled the silence. And yet when I closed my eyes, I could almost hear something in that gap. Not nothing, not empty, something buried. The echo of footsteps, maybe, or the whisper of a harmonica, or simply the bridge itself, humming through the wires, asking to be heard. Whatever was erased that night hadn't vanished. It had been hidden. And silence, in cold water, always means someone is still listening. Ask anyone in Coldwater about the bridge, and sooner or later they'll mention the sound. Not the creak of wood, not the groan of iron, but something stranger. They call it the breathing. On nights of heavy rain, when the boards swell and the bolts strain, the whole span seems to inhale. A long sigh runs through the planks, low and hollow, as if the bridge were drawing air into lungs buried beneath the river. Some say it's just the weather. Some say it's the wood itself, alive in its own way, remembering every footstep ever laid upon it. But the old ones tell it differently. They say the bridge is not wood and iron at all. They say it's a body. I went there myself one night to listen. The rain was steady, not fierce, the kind that softens the edges of the world. I stood in the middle of the span, closed my eyes and waited. At first only the patter of drops, the churn of the river. Then slowly a shift. The boards beneath me expanded, groaned, and then, yes, I heard it. A drawn-out sigh, deep and slow, beginning at one end of the bridge and traveling to the other like breath filling a chest. When it ended, the silence afterward was so complete it made my ears ache. Then another inhale. I counted without meaning to. Each sigh lasted 12 seconds. Each pause between 13. A rhythm, a cycle. The bridge breathing, as if it had its own pulse. Locals tell stories of what happens if you breathe in time with it. One boy claimed he did it once, years ago, matching the bridge's rhythm with his own lungs. He said for a moment he felt weightless, as if the boards had lifted him, carrying him just above the river. Another woman swore that when she matched the breath, she heard voices, low, layered, like a crowd whispering into her chest. I tried it myself, though every part of me resisted. I drew in air with the bridge, held it as the bridge held, released it as the sigh rolled out across the rain. At once I felt the rail vibrate beneath my hand. The air in my lungs grew cold, sharper than winter, and for the briefest instant I thought I heard something in the exhale. Not words exactly, but the shape of words. A name. I stepped back quickly, breaking the rhythm, my chest heaving too fast. The sound continued without me, steady, patient, as though the bridge didn't care if I joined or not. It would keep breathing long after I was gone. Later in the diner, June told me she avoids the bridge when it rains. Because when you hear it breathe, she said, stirring her coffee, you start to wonder what it's keeping alive. And in that moment, I understood why so many in town spoke of the bridge as if it were not just a place, but a presence. Not just wood and river, but something older. Something waiting. The Chevrolet had been searched before, of course. The jacket in the back, the donuts on the seat, the cassette in the console. But weeks later, when the car was moved into storage at the edge of town, Sheriff Morton returned for one last look. He said something about the case still felt unfinished, as if the car itself were holding back. He sat inside with the rain hammering on the tin roof above. The interior smelled faintly of mildew now, sugar gone sour in the paper bag. He opened the glove box, empty, checked under the mats, only grit and damp. Then he leaned under the driver's seat and felt something small, cold, pressed against the carpet. When he pulled it out, it was a ring of keys. 5 of them, tarnished silver, strung together on a bent loop. They weren't house keys. Too old, too heavy. Not car keys either. Their teeth were jagged in odd patterns, some double-cut, some notched too deeply. Morton held them up to the dim light. Rain streaked the windshield, making the metal glint like something alive. He slipped them into an evidence bag, but even through the plastic he said they felt wrong, too cold, as if they had been lying somewhere dark for far longer than one night. In the days that followed, he tried them everywhere. The Parker home, the Briggs garage, the Dwyer bakery. He even took them to the courthouse, to the school, to the church with its heavy oak doors. None fit. Not even close. One night, restless, he drove to the bridge. He stood in the rain at the midpoint and pulled the keys from his pocket. In the lamplight, the teeth caught the glow and shimmered like water. For reasons he couldn't explain, he lowered them to the boards. The sigh of the bridge rolled under his feet, and in that breath, the keys rattled. Not from the wind, not from his hand. They rattled as if answering. He shoved them back into his coat and left quickly, but the sound followed him. In his truck on the drive home, he swore the keys clicked faintly against each other without being touched, like locks turning in the dark. No door in town matched them, no lock accepted them, but somewhere, the sheriff believed, those keys belonged. And the bridge, in its slow, patient breathing, seemed to know exactly where. It started quietly, like everything in Coldwater does. A woman at the diner mentioned she hadn't been sleeping well. A boy at the school told his teacher he dreamed of rain even when the sky was clear. A fisherman swore he woke one night to the sound of footsteps on his roof, though the shingles were too slick for anyone to climb. Then more stories came, not told loudly, not published in the paper, but whispered over coffee, confessed in half-lit kitchens. They all described the same dream. A bridge stretching ahead longer than it should be. Rain falling, steady and endless. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, somewhere just behind. In the dream, no one ever reached the far side. The bridge went on forever, sighing beneath their feet, and the footsteps followed no matter how fast they walked. Some dreamed they turned to look and saw mist shaped like a person. Others dreamed they never dared turn at all. The strangest part came in the mornings. People woke to dampness on their floors, faint footprints leading from the door to the bed. Not muddy, not heavy, just damp, as though someone had walked barefoot across the boards after stepping in rain. The prints always dried within minutes, leaving no trace. But those who saw them never forgot. Parents began sprinkling salt at the thresholds, the way their grandparents once did. Children whispered to each other not to fall asleep near windows when it rained, and in every telling, the silence grew thicker. No one wanted to admit what they feared, that the bridge was not waiting for them outside, but already following them inside, step by step, through their dreams. I asked June at the diner if she'd had the dream. She didn't answer right away, just refilled my cup and stared at the rain sliding down the glass. Finally, she said, "It's not a dream if you wake up wet." And she walked away before I could ask what she meant. That night, I slept restlessly. When I woke near dawn, the rain had stopped. The room was still, and yet on the floor by the window, faint and vanishing, I thought I saw them. 4 damp prints, side by side, leading toward my bed. Every town has a figure that doesn't belong, a shadow folded into memory, but never spoken aloud. In Coldwater, that shadow was the man with the mints. People remembered him in fragments. A tall figure at the edge of the football field, hat pulled low, rain slicker glistening. He never sat in the bleachers, never cheered, never spoke. He sold peppermints for a dime each, pale discs wrapped in wax paper, cool and sharp on the tongue. Children said they tasted colder than snow. Parents asked each other whose uncle he might be, whose cousin, whose guest. No one ever knew. The last time anyone admitted seeing him was the fall of 1979, the night of the game. He stood near the bleachers again, quiet, rain dripping from his brim, the harmonica glinting faintly in his pocket. Some swore they saw Evan buy a mint from him. Others swore Mara glanced at him longer than she should have. Noah, they said, kept tapping his fingers like he was following a rhythm only the man could hear. I asked Orson about him. The old bridge tender leaned back in his chair, eyes clouding. "Not the first time," he said. "Long before those kids. When I was a boy, I saw him. Same coat, same hat, same peppermints." He hasn't aged a day. He told me about a girl who vanished in '52, leaving behind nothing but a paper wrapper, damp with rain. About a boy in '61, last seen chewing a mint while walking toward the bridge. About a fisherman in '68 who swore he heard a harmonica on the river, notes rising between the raindrops, though no boat passed by. Each story ended the same. The man appeared when the rain came. He sold his peppermints, or played his harmonica, or simply stood and watched. And soon after, someone was gone. The pattern was too neat to ignore. A figure who did not age, who left no name, who seemed to carry silence with him like a cloak. That night, I walked to the bridge again. The rain was thin, a mist more than a storm. The lamps glowed softly, reflections trembling on the water. I stood in the center and waited, breath shallow, eyes on the far end. For a moment, I thought I saw him. A tall shape in the drizzle, hat brim low, shoulders narrow. The smell reached me before the sight was clear, peppermint, sharp and sweet, carried on the wet air. I blinked, and the shape was gone. The smell faded, washed away by rain. But on the railing where he might have stood, I found something small, pale against the dark wood. A disc of candy, half dissolved, the paper wrapper clinging wet to the grain. I didn't touch it. I only stared, listening to the rain, wondering how many footsteps had been led away by the taste of something cold and sweet. The cemetery at Ashen Hill sat on a rise above the river, its stones leaning like old men nodding in sleep. Rain had washed the gravel paths into streams, and moss climbed every headstone, blurring the names until they looked more like shadows than words. I hadn't meant to go there that day. My feet carried me without thought, following the sound of the river below, the smell of wet earth, the weight of something unspoken. When I reached the gate, the iron creaked as if it had been waiting for me. The place was empty, yet not silent. The rain tapped gently on the stones, 1,000 faint knocks. The trees swayed and sighed. Somewhere, far off, a crow gave one sharp cry. I wandered between the rows, reading names of families long gone. Some stones had been claimed by ivy, others cracked clean through by frost. Then I came to it. A fresh marker, pale granite, not yet dulled by weather. It stood out among the old stones like a new tooth in a broken jaw. 3 names were carved into it: Evan Parker, Noah Briggs, Mara Dwyer. Beneath them, a single date: November 17th, 1979. I froze. My breath left me in a long, cold cloud. These were not graves. Their bodies had never been found. No service had ever been held. No burial plot ever claimed. And yet here, in the heart of the cemetery, stood a stone that said otherwise. I looked around. No flowers lay at its base. No offerings. No candles. Only damp earth and rain sliding down the letters like tears. When I asked later, no one at the church admitted to ordering it. The stonemason swore he hadn't carved it. The town clerk showed no record of a purchase. The Parker, Briggs, and Dwyer families knew nothing of it, and when they heard, their grief turned raw all over again. And yet, the stone remained. Some whispered it had been placed there by the bridge itself. That when it claims you, it marks you. Others said the peppermint man left it, carving names before their time. I don't know who carved it, or how it arrived without anyone seeing. I only know this: when I touched the cold granite, the rain seemed to pause for a single breath. And for that heartbeat of silence, I thought I heard footsteps circling behind me, soft on the wet grass. When I turned, there was no one, just the stone, the names, and the steady whisper of rain beginning again. The Parker house sat quiet on a street that no longer seemed to belong to the rest of Coldwater. Curtains drawn, porch light burning, always burning. A home that had learned to wait. Lorraine Parker opened the door slowly when I knocked. Her eyes were lined with the kind of tiredness that comes not from sleepless nights, but from years of carrying a weight that refuses to be set down. She let me in without a word, as if she had already decided I would come. The kitchen smelled faintly of lavender, though it couldn't hide the dampness that clung to every corner. She gestured to the table, where a small object sat waiting. A cassette recorder, the kind teenagers once carried to capture songs off the radio. Its plastic was scratched, its buttons dulled by use. Beside it lay a single tape, its label handwritten in Evan's neat block letters. 2 words: The Bridge. Her voice was low, barely steady. He liked to record the rain. Said he wanted to keep the sound. I didn't tell anyone about this before. I couldn't. But I think you should hear it. She pressed play. At first, only rain. Heavy, constant, drumming against what must have been the bedroom window. Then the faint creak of a chair, Evan's breath near the microphone. A boy recording the world he thought would always be his. Minutes passed, nothing but weather. Then, faintly, another sound slipped in. A knock, dull, slow, from wood. 3 beats, a pause, 3 again. Evan whispered into the recorder, his voice uncertain. It's like footsteps on the bridge. He laughed then, soft and nervous, the way kids do when they aren't sure whether they're joking. The rain swelled, covering the sound, but soon the knocking returned. Closer this time, clearer. Not 3 beats now. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. Again. The tape hissed, the rain roared, and then, faint but sharp, a breath. Not Evan's, not a boy's at all. A long exhale, as if someone leaned close to the microphone. The recording clicked off. Lorraine's hand trembled as she stopped the machine. Her eyes glistened, but she did not cry. She only whispered, "He made that 2 nights before. 2 nights before he was gone." The tape lay on the table between us, heavy as stone. Rain brushed the windows outside, steady, patient, like fingers drumming a rhythm only the bridge could keep. And I thought then that Evan had not just recorded the rain. He had recorded the bridge breathing back. That night, I sat alone in the small room above the diner, the recorder on the table, Evan's tape waiting like a closed door. The rain outside was steady, soft enough to soothe, strong enough to blur the edges of the world. I pressed play. Again, the rain, a blanket of sound, timeless, patient. Then the creak of the chair, Evan's breath, his whisper. It's like footsteps. On the bridge, his nervous laugh. And then, the rhythm. 4 knocks. A pause. 4 again. The bridge's steady beat caught and captured. But this time, listening alone in the dark, I caught something else. It was faint, buried deep in the hiss, almost lost under the rain. A thread of sound, thinner than a sigh. At first I thought it was just the tape degrading. Old cassettes often invent their own ghosts. But then the thread sharpened, grew clearer, until I could almost hear words, not loud, not clear, but shaped, formed. Don't follow. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It was all of those at once, layered together, like a crowd whispering in unison from very far away. The rain grew louder in the recording, as if trying to smother it. Evan's laugh trembled again, but the voice pushed through once more. Don't follow me. I stopped the tape so suddenly the recorder clicked like a slammed door. My hands shook. The room was silent, but outside the rain quickened, tapping faster against the window, almost as if the world itself was repeating the words back to me. Don't follow. Don't follow. I stared at the tape, afraid to touch it again, afraid to rewind, afraid to hear what else might be hiding between the drops. And then, in the silence after the machine clicked off, I realized something worse. The rhythm of the rain against the glass matched the rhythm of the bridge. 4 beats. A pause. 4 again. As though the bridge itself had been listening all along. I carried the tape to the sheriff the next morning. His office smelled of wet wool and old coffee, rain still dripping from his hat on the rack. He looked up as I entered, eyes shadowed, as if the night had left its mark on him. I set the recorder on his desk. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I pressed play. The rain filled the room, hissing through the small speaker, followed by Evan's whisper, his laugh, the footsteps. And then, faint but undeniable, the voice, "Don't follow me." The words were thin, but they clung to the air like cobwebs. Morton flinched. He tried to mask it, but his hand gripped the edge of the desk until his knuckles whitened. When the tape ended, he switched it off himself, thumb heavy on the button. He sat back, exhaling slowly, the sound more weary than surprised. "I've heard it before," he said at last. His voice was low, rough, the voice of a man breaking a silence he had carried too long. "On the bridge. The first night. When the crew packed up, when the candles burned low, I stayed behind, put my hand on the boards, and it whispered, just like that." He looked at me then, eyes clear but haunted. I told myself it was the rain, or the river, or my own damn head. I wrote it off. But I knew. I asked him why he never told anyone. "Because once you admit the bridge speaks," he said, "you start to wonder how long it's been talking, and who else has been listening." From the drawer of his desk, he pulled out the folded letter written in green ink. He laid it beside the recorder. "Don't look at the water. Listen to the ground." "They match," he said. "The voice, the letter. The message is the same. Don't follow. Don't look. Just Listen." He leaned forward, his voice nearly a whisper. "And I've been listening. Every rain since that night. It always comes back. Not loud. Never loud. Just enough to remind me. And I don't think it's done." The tape lay between us, silent again. But in that silence, I could feel it. The weight of the bridge pressing into the room, the echo of its breath reaching even here. Sheriff Morton closed the drawer, hiding the letter away. "You wanted the truth," he said. "Now you've got it. The bridge isn't just keeping their footsteps. It's keeping their voices, too." Clara lived in a small house at the edge of town, curtains drawn tight, the walls crowded with photographs that seemed too bright for the dim rooms they hung in. She welcomed me carefully, like someone afraid of letting too much air in, and made tea that steamed faintly in chipped cups. She hadn't spoken much to anyone since Mara disappeared. People said she kept to herself, that grief had tied her tongue. But when I asked her about the phone call, her eyes sharpened, the silence between us breaking like glass. "She laughed," Clara said. Her voice was low, as if she feared the walls might be listening. "That was the last thing. Mara laughed. And then the rain came over the line. But there was more." She gripped her cup with both hands. "I didn't tell the police. Couldn't. But I heard someone else. Not her. Not Evan. Not Noah. A breath. Like someone leaning into the receiver. And since then, I've been dreaming." Her gaze lifted to mine. "Every night, the same dream, the bridge, the rain, Mara walking ahead of me, her hair damp, her shoulders straight, Evan and Noah beside her. And then..." She paused, her knuckles pale against the porcelain. "Then there's another, a fourth, tall, hat pulled low, always just beside her, where I should be. I call out, but she never turns. None of them do. They just keep walking. 4 sets of footsteps. Not 3. Her voice trembled, and I realized she was near tears, though her eyes stayed dry. "Sometimes in the dream I try to follow, but the boards change, they stretch. The bridge gets longer, and the fourth figure, he looks back, only once, but I can't see his face. Just the hat. Always the hat." I asked if she thought it was the Peppermint Man. She shook her head, quickly, as though even naming him might invite him nearer. "I think it's the bridge," she whispered. "Not a man, not anymore. Just the bridge. Walking with them. Keeping them." The rain began then, sudden, against her window, a steady drum. Clara closed her eyes. "It's coming again," she said. "I'll dream it tonight. I always do when it rains." When I left, the air outside was heavy, the road glistening. Behind me, I thought I heard faint footsteps on the wet pavement, keeping time with my own. 4 beats. Pause. 4 again. And I couldn't shake the image of Mara's friend, trapped in a dream where she was always too late, always 1 step behind. The attic above the newspaper office had not changed. Dust still hung in the air like cobwebs of breath. The bulb still swung faintly as if stirred by something unseen. I had left thinking I had taken everything of value. David Keene's journal, the one filled with notes and warnings. But something drew me back. The crate where I'd found the first journal was heavier than I remembered. Beneath the yellowed editions of the paper, under stacks of photographs, I found another book. This one smaller, leather cracked, the spine nearly broken. When I opened it, I saw not words but drawings, dozens of them. The bridge, page after page, the same scene sketched in black pencil, rain cutting across the paper in quick, frantic lines. Some were smudged as if drawn in haste, others darkened until the graphite tore the page. And on nearly every drawing, there were figures, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, but most often 4. 4 silhouettes walking across the span. 3 were close together, heads bent, shoulders touching. The 4th lingered just behind, taller, hat brim pulled low, always the same shape, always the same distance, as though it were following but never joining. On one page, David had pressed so hard the pencil had nearly broken through. The figures leaned forward, stretched, like they were being pulled into the mist itself. Underneath, he had scrawled a single line: "The bridge never lets them cross." Another page showed only the 4th figure, its outline darker, thicker, as if David had drawn it again and again on top of itself, trying to make it clearer, but only making it heavier. Its face was never drawn, just shadow, just absence. The last page was blank except for words written in jagged script across the center. 4 beats. A pause. 4 again. I closed the book and sat in the dim attic, the rain ticking faintly on the roof. The drawings seemed to hum in my hands, as though graphite could carry a rhythm. David Keene had not been imagining. He had seen what the rest of the town had whispered, what Orson had tapped on his chair, what Clara dreamed each night. The truth wasn't just that 3 kids had vanished. It was that they hadn't gone alone. The Parker home was dim, the curtains drawn against the endless gray. Lorraine greeted me softly, her voice thin as thread. But it was Evan's father, Daniel, who surprised me. He had rarely spoken before, letting his wife answer questions, letting silence cover what words could not. That evening, though, he motioned me into the living room, sat heavily in a chair by the window, and began to speak. "I've kept this to myself," he said, eyes fixed on the glass where rain traced crooked paths. "But if you're chasing the truth, then you ought to know what happened to me. Not the night Evan vanished. Before." His voice was steady at first, then broke into pauses, the way old boards splinter under weight. "It was years ago. Evan was just a boy, maybe 10. Lorraine had fallen asleep early and I couldn't settle. I went out walking, and the rain led me to the bridge. I don't know why. Maybe I was restless, maybe curious. But I stopped halfway across, leaned against the rail, and listened." He drew a long breath, his knuckles tightening on the chair's arm. "That's when I heard them. Footsteps. Not mine. Behind me. Slow. Careful. 4 steps. A pause. Oh, 4 again. I turned, but the span was empty. Just rain, just mist. Still, the steps came closer. I told myself it was the bridge, the wood swelling. But then, he closed his eyes. I smelled peppermint. Sharp, cold, like the man was standing right behind me. And the footsteps stopped just at my back. I felt the weight of someone there. I didn't look. I couldn't. I walked straight ahead, fast, until I was off the bridge. And when I looked back, nothing followed. The room was quiet except for the rain tapping on the roof. Lorraine stood in the doorway, her face pale, but she said nothing. Daniel's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. When Evan vanished, I knew the bridge had been waiting. It let me go that night, but it wasn't done. It wanted someone else. Maybe it wanted him. Maybe it wants all of us, one by one. He leaned forward, his eyes hollow. You don't just cross that bridge. You bargain with it. And not everyone comes back. Outside, the rain strengthened, rattling the windows like knuckles against glass. I felt the chill settle into my bones, not from the weather, but from the weight of a father's silence finally breaking, a silence that had been waiting like the bridge itself for someone to listen. The Briggs house was smaller than the Parkers, tucked near the end of a quiet lane where the trees leaned close. The windows glowed faintly, but the light inside was dim, yellowed by age and grief. Noah's parents greeted me with tired courtesy, but it was his younger sister, Emma, who stepped forward. She must have been no more than 8 when Noah disappeared, yet her eyes carried the look of someone who had grown older too fast. She led me to her room, walls still papered with posters that had begun to peel at the corners. A small guitar leaned in the corner, dusty, one string broken. She touched it softly as though it were a relic. "Noah used to play for me," she said. "Before bed, he'd make up songs, silly ones. Said the guitar could chase away nightmares." Her voice wavered, but then she straightened. "After he was gone, I thought I'd never hear it again. But then the rain started talking." I asked her what she meant. She looked at the window, rain streaking down the glass in crooked silver lines. "When it rains hard, I hear it. Not music, not a full song, just strings. Notes stretched out, bending, like someone plucking a guitar from very far away. Sometimes it's only one note, sometimes 2, but I know it's him. It's Noah. He's still playing, only now the rain carries it." Her parents exchanged uneasy glances but didn't stop her. It was clear they had heard her story before. Emma pressed on. "Last week I heard it again, a whole chord this time, low, trembling. And I swear I saw the strings shake on that old guitar, right there in the corner. Nobody touched it. The air was still. But it moved, like the rain was playing it." She went to her desk and pulled out a notebook. On the pages were lines drawn like staff paper, with small circles and notes sketched clumsily. "I've been writing them down," she said. "Every note I hear. It's not finished yet, but I think he's trying to send a song." I looked at the notebook. The pattern was simple at first, then grew stranger. Notes stretched, pauses where no pauses should be. The rhythm was familiar, though. 4 beats, a pause, 4, again. Emma touched the window pane with her fingertips. "He's out there," she whispered. "Not gone, just caught in the rain. And maybe, if I play it back right, I can call him home." The room was quiet then, except for the soft tap of water against the glass. And in that tapping, faint and fragile, I thought I heard it too. A string vibrating, trembling, plucked by invisible hands. The Dwyer Bakery had been closed since that November. Its windows were still painted with cheerful white swirls, but dust lay thick on the counters inside, and the bell above the door no longer rang. Mara's mother, Elaine, met me at the side entrance, her apron folded neatly over one arm as though she still couldn't bear to put it away for good. She led me into the kitchen, where the air smelled faintly of flour gone stale. We sat at a long wooden table scarred with years of kneading, and after a long silence, she slid a folded envelope across to me. "I shouldn't have kept it," she said softly, "but it was hers, and it scared me. I didn't want the sheriff, or the neighbors, or anyone else making it worse. But maybe it's time." The envelope was worn, its flap never sealed. Inside was a single sheet of paper, creased from being read and reread. Mara's handwriting filled the page, steady but uneven, as though she had written quickly, afraid the words might change if she paused too long. October 28th, 1979. Dear Mom, I don't know how to say this out loud, so I'm writing it instead. Lately, I feel like the bridge is watching me. I don't mean like a person watching, not eyes, exactly. More like, when I walk past it, I know it notices. The board's grown different under my steps. The rails feel warm, even in the rain. And sometimes, when it's quiet, I think I hear it say my name. Just once, soft, but enough that I look over my shoulder. I don't tell anyone because it sounds crazy. But Clara says she's felt it too. like someone's walking right behind her when she's on the span. She laughs it off. I don't laugh. It feels real. Too real. If something happens, I want you to know I felt it first. Like the bridge chose me before I chose it. Love, Mara. The letter ended there. No signature flourish, no second page. Just that steady hand, pressing harder toward the end, the ink darker as though she knew time was running out. Elaine's voice trembled when she spoke. She never gave it to me. I found it in her room under her pillow after that night. She pressed her hands flat to the table as though steadying herself. I kept it because I thought maybe if I ignored it, it would fade. But it hasn't. The bridge keeps taking from me. First her, then my sleep, then my faith. The rain tapped gently at the bakery windows, soft but insistent, like knuckles against glass. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into its envelope. And I thought then of what Mara had written. The bridge chose me before I chose it. It wasn't just a place. It was a presence. And Mara had felt it long before the night it claimed her. Midnight in Coldwater is not the end of a day, but the pause between breaths. The town quiets, the windows dim, but the rain never truly stops. That night it fell in a fine mist, silver under the lamps, heavy enough to blur the far end of the bridge. I went alone. No notebook, no recorder, no excuse. Just myself, my footsteps, and the bridge. The boards were slick beneath my boots, the rail damp beneath my hand. I began walking, slowly, counting under my breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. The sound of my steps echoed back, faint, delayed. At first I thought it was the usual trick of wood and rain, but as I kept counting, I realized something unsettling. The echo was not quite my own. It was slower, a half-beat behind, as if something else were walking just out of rhythm, keeping close but not identical. I stopped. The echo stopped. I took one step forward. The echo answered. One, deliberate, heavy. I took 2 more. The echo followed. I whispered aloud, though no one was there to hear me. Are you counting 2? The rain thickened, ticking harder against the boards, and in that steady beat I heard it. Not just an echo, not just wood shifting, but steps. 4. A pause. 4 again. Not mine. Not anymore. I forced myself to keep walking, though every instinct screamed to turn back. Halfway across, where the Parker car had been found, the sound grew stronger. The boards seemed to pulse beneath me, swelling, sighing, as if I were not walking on wood at all, but on something alive. Something that noticed each footfall, something that chose whether or not to let me pass. I stopped again. Silence. Then, without moving, I heard it. One step, then another. Coming closer, slow, certain. I turned, but the mist swallowed the far end of the bridge. Empty. Still, the steps came. 4. A pause. 4 more. Right up to where I stood. I backed away, my hand slick against the rail, my breath loud in the hush. And then, just as suddenly, the sound ceased. The mist shifted, the rain softened, and the bridge lay quiet as though nothing had ever happened. I ran the last stretch, boots slipping on wet boards, my pulse still keeping that terrible rhythm. 4. Pause. 4. Again. When I reached the end, I dared one glance back. The lamps glowed pale in the mist. The bridge stood still, but I knew better. The bridge had counted me that night, and I had no way of knowing if it would let me walk back again. It came just after 3 in the morning, the hour when even the rain sounds tired. The phone on the nightstand rang sharp against the silence, its bell cutting through my half-sleep. I stared at it for a moment, waiting for it to stop, but it kept ringing, steady, insistent. When I lifted the receiver, there was no greeting, no voice, only static. A low hiss, broken by faint crackles, like fire smoldering under water. I said hello once. Twice. My own voice sounded too loud in the empty room. Then, beneath the hiss, I heard it. Rain. Not outside my window, not on the roof above, but inside the line. A steady patter close to my ear, as if the call itself had been placed from the middle of the storm. I almost hung up. But then the static shifted, and something pushed through. A voice. Thin, layered, fragile. Male and female, young and old all at once. The same timbre I had heard on Evan's tape buried in the hiss. It whispered only 2 words. Not your fault. The line popped, then went silent. The rain outside my window carried on, unbroken, but the phone in my hand was dead. I sat there for a long time, listening to the dial tone that never returned, the silence that grew thicker than the storm. Not your fault. The words rang louder in memory than they had in the line, but I couldn't shake them. Whose voice had it been? Evan's, Mara's, Noah's, or the bridge itself, wearing their voices the way it wore their footsteps? The worst part was not the message. It was the weight beneath it, the implication that someone believed otherwise. That guilt was expected, demanded, even if I didn't yet understand why. When dawn came pale and thin, I looked at the phone again. Water pooled faintly in the receiver, damp as though the rain had seeped through the wire itself. The town was asleep when I left the diner. The streets shone slick in the lamplight, and the rain fell in its endless rhythm. Not fierce, not soft, just steady, as though the sky itself were keeping time. I walked the familiar road toward the bridge, the weight of every story, every letter, every dream pressing close behind me. When I reached the span, the lamps glowed pale through the mist, and the boards sighed under the weight of the storm. I stepped onto the planks slowly, one foot after another, listening. The bridge breathed back. 4 beats. A pause. 4 again. The rhythm I had come to know too well. I stopped at the center. The place where the Chevrolet once idled, where candles once flickered, where footsteps always seemed to end. The silence grew heavy around me. Not the absence of sound, but a presence. Full. Alive. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. A slow, deliberate, approaching from both sides at once. 4 beats. Pause. 4 again. They did not hurry. They never had to. The mist thickened, shapes forming just at the edge of sight. I thought I saw Evan's jacket, Noah's guitar strap, Mara's hair pulled into its familiar clip. 3 figures, blurred, half-formed. And behind them, taller, hat brim low, the 4th that had always followed. I tried to speak, but my voice faltered, lost in the rain. The figures did not answer. They only stood, waiting. The bridge sighed, long and low, a breath that seemed to pull the air from my chest, and in that exhale, I understood. The silence was not empty. It was not absence. It was an invitation. Every step that had ever been taken here was still present, folded into the boards. Every laugh, every cry, every whisper was waiting, woven into the rhythm of rain and wood. The bridge had not taken them. It had kept them. And it was still keeping room. I backed away, slowly, the rails slick under my hand. The shapes in the mist did not follow. The footsteps ceased. The silence settled again, patient, unbroken. When I reached the end of the span, I turned once more. The lamps flickered in the drizzle, the mist hung low, the boards gleamed wet. Nothing stood there now. Nothing at all. But the silence was still breathing, waiting. And I knew, as everyone in Coldwater knows, that the bridge will never be finished with us.